I guess you could argue that the way that we use our roads was changing anyway, but COVID-19 short-circuited that transition towards cycling and new forms of travel, like microtransport, which we see more of today on our streets. All of this is under the banner of active travel, which is becoming more part of our language day by day. But before we can make that change to these new forms of travel, we really need to take stock of what we've already got. How can we plan for the future if we don't know what we've got today? And it's all about taking stock. It's all about understanding what we have, what state that's in, what state it's going to be in the future, and what investment we need to get to that point. How much money do we need to invest into our network today to be able to provide this move towards active travel, to be able to improve the quality of the road network? To be able to make that case, we really need to understand what we have today. It's incredibly important to do that. And that's what we do at Gaist. We provide our customers with that understanding of the road network, the condition, what's there, the fabric of the road, not just an approximation or an indices, but actually more like a forensic level view of the road condition, and the condition of the footways and the street furniture, all of the equipment that sits in the roadscape that is an integrated system that all works together, curbs, pavement, the materials there. We bring back or bring together a really detailed understanding of what's there. So let's just take a minute just to discuss how we do that. Well, as you may be aware, we use an image-based system because it's important to us to go and collect a digital record of the network in high definition and bring that back to our offices so that we can do the detailed analysis back at base, not in the field, not out there where it's expensive and it's unsafe, but back at our offices where we can pore over that data and pull it apart, add detail to the records that we give to our customers, because that's what we're about. It's about detail, because with detail, with data, you can do an enormous amount, not just in terms of understand what we've got now and what state the road is in today, but using modelling techniques that we've developed, we can start to look at what happens if we add more money into our maintenance regime, what happens if we get a bad winter. We can look at those scenarios and we can start to model what might happen. But we can only do that if we've got really good empirical, detailed data to start with. And that's what we're about. That's where our reputation has come from, really. One of high definition data, but high quality. Again, we don't want vagueness in any of the data that we collect. We want to make sure that that data tells us the story. But it tells us the right story. And we can only do that if we've got really, really good data that we can rely on. So that's where we start. We start by collecting high resolution, highly accurate data, which is then the raw materials, if you like, of the information that we're then going to derive from it. And the information that we pull from our data is not just about the surface of the road, it's not just about highway maintenance, but there's other things now that we need to extract from that. What have we got on the highway? Because we're going to need that infrastructure soon. We're looking at charging cars, electric cars. Where are we going to do that? Where on the road are we going to do that? And what infrastructure is already there that might interfere with that? We need to know that. And the way that we collect data allows us to pull off all that other information as well that adds real value to the surveys that we actually do. Now, we also recognise, of course, that the network is not the same everywhere. And taking Scotland as an example, you've got some highly urbanised areas there, but at the same time, you've got some very rural areas. So over the years, we've spent a lot of time and effort trying to craft a survey that copes with all of those environments. There are obviously different challenges in a city centre that you don't get out in the rural areas, and similarly you've got problems in rural areas that you don't get in city centres. So we've designed our surveys to cope with all the different factors and condition that you get both in a rural environment and an urban environment, a suburban environment, so that we can cater with all the different classes of roads essentially. But condition is one thing, and as I said before, we take a forensic approach to understanding that condition, because that is a key data set, if you like, that's going to drive all the information that we get from that. But the real output that we're after is that of treatments. What we want to be able to offer our customers straight off the back of the work that we do is our very robust maintenance programs. So you can understand what you've got to do, where you've got to do it, and look at options. Do we do structural patching? Are we going to do a complete resurface here? We can do that because we collect the kind of detail and the attributes that you need to be able to drive those maintenance programs. It's one thing telling you how bad your road is in respect of an indices, but how does that then translate into a treatment? You need to know what the road surface is made of. You need to know what the curb is doing. Have we got enough curb out there to allow us to relay a new surface without planing out? Or do we have to plane out? If we do, what kind of ironwork have we got there? So all of those things really come from having the right kind of data in the first place. And that brings us back to how we designed our survey. We designed our survey with all of that in mind first. We knew what our customers needed to do with the data, wanted to do with the data. So we had to design a survey that collected all of those attributes to allow that whole journey really from surveying the road right through to relaying the road with a new road surface. And then beyond that, how's that road surface going to perform? So how do we know that? Well, we know that by measuring the road year on year on year. So we can see how it's deteriorating. As you can see how different materials are deteriorating, and then drive that back into our models, overlaying that with traffic usage, etc., to make predictions. So it really always boils back down to, do we have the right kind of data? And as I say, as a company, we've built a reputation, become very successful, not just in this country but around the world, because we've collected the right kind of data to drive the right kind of decisions. And it is no more complicated than that. Obviously, there's a lot of work gone into developing the technology and the methods that we use, but the big driver is to give our customers the ability to make the decisions they want to make without having to reprocess data or bring in consultants and everything else. Is to be able to look at that data and to make a decision. That, I guess, is what we're all about, really, is boiling everything down so that you guys can make the decisions you need to make to do the day job. Is to look after that network and make the decisions that are cost effective to get the most from the money that you have got to put into your network. Be it if you're in an urban environment or you're in a rural environment. It really doesn't matter. But what does matter is that you've got the right decision at your fingertips, and at your fingertips, not through some complicated program, that you can go to something, you can get the information you need and action that information almost immediately. Often when I talk about data and information, the conversation tends to gravitate towards the technology, which is the interesting end of what we do, I suppose. But actually, that's not what we should be really concerned about. Certainly not our clients. They should be concerned about the outcomes. How we process data, how we get to that point, should be transparent, almost invisible, really. There's so much hype around these days around artificial intelligence that it's probably worth me spending a few minutes just talk a little bit about how we use that. Well, actually, artificial intelligence has been around for quite a while now, to be fair. We've been using technologies such as machine learning, computer vision. These are all elements, all component parts, really, of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is just a method of processing data. It doesn't bring anything too extraordinary to the table, but what it does do is it allows us to process volumes of data that hitherto would have been quite difficult to do or very expensive to do by humans. And of course that plays nicely into what we do today. So in terms of collecting large volumes of imagery, we can use AI to comb through and look for the patterns, look for cracking, look for assets, etc., signs. All the things that we would have taken us quite a long time to collect, we can now do quite quickly. However, artificial intelligence is not perfect. It's artificial intelligence, there's a clue in the name. Human intelligence is still much more nuanced and much more powerful than a computer. The speed in which these systems can go through data sets, it's phenomenal, and certainly can do it quicker than a human. But the kind of decisions that it makes are still very simple computer logic as compared to the kind of logic that we as humans can apply. So artificial intelligence has definitely got a part to play and can definitely make things quicker, easier, and ultimately cheaper. But it doesn't necessarily bring us more intelligence. That really comes from how we view the data, how we assimilate that, and how we turn that into The decisions that I keep talking about. The decisions are the important thing. What can we understand from the data, and then what can we do with our network, with our maintenance plans, with our investment programming, whatever it might be, to make that more cost effective, or better for the network long term, or better for users, or safer. All of those intelligent outputs don't necessarily come from AI. They come from us, but they come from data that has been processed or helped along the way by AI. We often say that AI does that heavy lifting. It can sift through huge amounts of data. But we as a company, we don't take that as being definitive. We still apply humans in the process to do the quality checking, because we still believe that the human is certainly more intelligent than a computer at this point. However, there are tasks, as I said, that it can do quicker. So that's how we use AI. We are using it every day, and we have been for a number of years. And we'll continue to leverage the value of AI to produce better systems down the line. I want to talk a little bit more about those intelligent outputs that we've talked about, those decisions, because decisions are going to be a big part of what we do now. We've got to make some big decisions about how we manage our infrastructure. The way that we travel is going to change. We know that we're now going to be faced with an electric future when it comes to cars. We're going to have to charge these electric cars. And again, we've mentioned already that we're going to have to consider where the infrastructure is going to go, what's going to look like, how much of it, where can we put it, where should we put it, and what will that do in terms of traffic flow and parking. All of these things we're going to have to understand, and all of that data needs to be compiled, and it needs to come from the roadscape that we survey every day. Air quality, another agenda. We've got to move forward there. We've got to drive down those emissions. We already have a climate change agenda as well to play into. And then there's the connected autonomous vehicles that we've talked about. That's going to be coming down the line as well, which will need its own infrastructure, sensors, etc. So knowing as much as we can about that roadscape is what we're about as a company. You know, we go out there and survey the roads, yes, to look at road condition, yes, we look at footways, etc. But that wider roadscape is something that we all need to know more about if we're going to make the investment decisions that we need to make, and for those decisions to be correct and robust, or in fact, actually, more of the point, to make the case for that investment. It's one thing understanding what we've got to do, but it's another thing having the money to do it with. So understanding where things are, understanding the context of different bits of infrastructure is going to be key going forward. And that's really a large part of our philosophy, is if we're out there travelling around the roadscape with the imagery that we've got, then we should be bringing that in and peeling off all of those different layers of intelligence. And indeed, that's what we do. I think I've made the point that we collect data, but it's worth making the point that we don't necessarily sell technology for you to use that data. In fact, you've already got the technology that you need, pavement management systems, GIS, etc. We've designed the data that we produce to be sympathetic with all those systems. So our data is system agnostic, and we want it to be that way because we want you to get the most from the investment you've already made into IT. We don't want to sell you some more. There are companies that will do that. They survey the roads for you, and then they'll sell you the systems to be able to view that data. That's not what we do. We provide data that people can use today with the technology they've already got. So our data can go into almost any proprietary system that you operate yourselves, and that's all part of our philosophy of making sure that you get the maximum value from the data that you buy. You don't need to make any kind of costly investment into other technology to go with it. Obviously, the adaptation and evolution of the infrastructure, not just the road infrastructure, but other utility infrastructure, has never stopped. It's ongoing all the time. And particularly now with the advent of the rollout of fibre to the premises from the cabinet, many cities and towns are now having an enormous amount of work being done on their network as the comms utility companies are actually laying in new fibre. That, of course, means that there's lots of reinstatements going on footways and carriageways. And we're very much involved in that as well as a business. We work with those utility companies to go out there and to measure for them the different kinds of materials that they're going to be faced with in the footway and carriageways so that they can minimise the disruption and make their rollout more efficient. But that's particularly timely now because the change in legislation has meant that condition surveys have to be done before and after these reinstatements are put in. So we can help both the local authority and the utility companies now in having one unified view of what the state of the network was like before this work is done and what it's like afterwards. So there's going to be a lot less contention around who damaged what or how good the workmanship or is not of those different works. We can provide imagery of that as part of our process of looking at the roadscape. So there are advantages in that as well. So in summary, the picture that I hope I've painted in respect of who we are and what we do is one of a company that is preoccupied really with the value of data. We use technology, as I mentioned before, in many different ways, and we use AI, and we have done for years. But it's really in that endeavour to give our customers the data that they can use to make decisions. And that's, I guess, what I want to leave you with, really, is that that's what it's about now. It's about now having the ability to make some very robust decisions based on the kind of data that we can bring in, the kind of data that is needed now for a lot of those changes going forward. And that data, once we turn it into information, can be used now very effectively and is being used very effectively by a lot of our customers to leverage funding, to make the case for funding, because without the correct levels of funding, asset management or life cycle asset management falls flat on its face. Asset management is driven by financial management. Without the finance, you can't manage the asset. So asset management falls over without that business case. And that's what we're about, really, is giving our customers the business case that they can take to the politicians, to the people that hold the budget, and make that case, not only to protect the budgets that they've got, but hopefully to be able to leverage more funding from the system. So thank you to everybody who's listened to this. I hope you found it interesting. And good luck with all that you're doing on the network. And hopefully I'll have a chance to speak to you at a different time and place in the future. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.